Real good stuff.
All right. Before we begin tonight, I would like to have a moment of silence. As you guys are all well aware at this point, we had two Aurora Central Catholic students, Seth Egger of Montgomery and Allie Bradford of Aurora, that were killed a week ago in a car accident when it collided with a semi during the fog. Before we continue, I would like to ask that we join in a moment of silence to remember them, and then we'll get started. Thank you. We'll call the meeting to order, and please rise for the pledge. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Trustee Spurling. Here. Trustee Lee.
Here.
Trustee Hines.
Yay.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yay.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Here.
And we're all here. We'll move on to public participation. Anybody here for that portion? I'd like to wait just a second in case Shar decides maybe she does want to say something. All right, we'll move on to our first item for discussion this evening, which is the FY16 budget review and attachment. With that, I will ask Director Van Voren for a summary of this, of the whole budget.
The first 3 pages of the packet behind the agenda, the first 2 pages is the all fund summary. First page, page 1, being the summary of all the revenues for all the funds, $25.3 million. This page 2 is a all fund summary of the expenditures. That is at $25.0 million. And then page 3 is the general fund summary. That is our general activity for the village. And that, at this point, shows a net income of $5,870 for the recommended fiscal year 16 budget. There have been 2 major changes included in the fiscal year 16 recommended budget since it was presented to the board. And one of those is property taxes. We received the extension from Kane County, and that extension is approximately $45,000 less than what we thought we were going to get. And then on the other side of that, when you look at finance, in the finance department, we received the quote for our liability insurance for this year, and that was approximately $45,000 less on than what we thought it was going to be due to claim history. So more or less they offset each other. So the net income that you're seeing there, or the net surplus, is roughly the same as it was presented to the board the last time we talked about the general fund. If there are any other questions or any other comments, we can certainly answer those at this time.
Thank you. Comments?
Does this include vehicles in this budget?
If there's anything you'd like to discuss with the budget.
Yeah, I don't see any use for us buying any new vehicles this coming budget. I say we get them out, don't get any this year, and wait till next year and see what happens. And another thing for wages. If you want to give wages out, 1% is fine, but anything over 1% I won't vote for.
I would agree also. I'm interested in capping the raises at 1%. I'm really concerned about how much money is going to get taken from our budget with the state situation. We don't know if it's going to be the 900,000 or somewhere in between. At any rate, we're going to be down money, and I'd like to see us cap it at 1%.
That would be for the non-union.
Correct?
Yes.
Union contracts are up this year?
The Public Works contract is up
Okay.
at April 30th, yeah. So it'll be, for the new fiscal year, they'll have a new contract.
What did you have it in here as? I'm sorry.
For Public Works,
No, for everybody.
I think 3.25.
Yes.
Yes, that's what I have written down.
What's that total dollar amount?
For the non-union?
Yeah, for non-union.
I want to say 33,000,
Yes.
somewhere in that area, which is down from what was in the current budget. This year's budget was like 36 and change, and now it's down to 33.
33. Okay.
Do we know what were the increases for Public Works with their current contract?
I mean, they could get between 1% and 4%, depending on,
Okay, so
Current contract.
they're between 1% and 4%. We know the police are at 2%.
no, the police are at 4.5% or 6%,
Right.
depending on where they are in the steps.
So capping for our non-union would save us, if I'm doing the math, just around $20,000 on a $26 million budget, $26 million budget.
Did you see that Public Works are going to ask 4%, you think?
But they
Right
could
now,
get
they
that
could
much
between
this
1%
year.
and 4% during this past contract,
It's the next
can't-
year on.
next contract.
Yeah,
Why can't we give them 1%? And otherwise, to make it even, give them an extra day off with pay?
I mean, we can try and negotiate anything, but we can't,
Yeah.
we can't say that they're
I don't see
getting,
giving
that they're getting
anybody over
1%.
1%.
Now, I guess I'd
Because
prefer
we're in
not
a
to,
bind.
because I'd prefer not to discuss our bargaining strategy
Right.
here, if we can avoid that.
Jeff, may I ask your opinion? If we were to cap this, do you think that would help us in our negotiation with Public Works? I mean, are they going to pay attention to this?
I mean, maybe I don't know if it would help, I guess we could use that as an argument, that here's what we're doing. They're going to want to go look and see they're going to have a list of comparable communities,
Right.
and that's what they're going to look at. So, I mean, that's going to be a big part of their argument. If we try and say it's 0, it's 1%.
I
I
just
mean,
want to
so
make sure that.
what we're
we-
paying non-union will be a piece of that we could use to argue. On the other side of that, they'll look at comparable communities, which I think will probably be higher than that. I don't know that, I haven't gone out to look, but I think generally, things seem to be improving. So, don't know if that helped or not, but.
You can't always go by what the other communities do. This is Montgomery. We got to go by what we think is best for the village.
For union negotiations, other communities does come into play, because if they want to go to arbitration, that's part of what'll come into play is we'll develop a set of comparable communities, and that'll be part of the basis.
That's
We
fine.
just have to stand our ground, that's all.
That's fine with me, as long as our lawyer looks at things like, instead of 2%, 4%, 2% or whatever, they look at what our pay is compared to everybody else. Because like I've said before, I think our pay is as high as anybody around here.
Yeah, I mean,
So
ranges is definitely one of the things you look at.
the percentage is nothing to me. I don't care about the percentage. You go by what everybody's making, and we don't have to be on the top all the time.
No.
That's right.
I think both of those come into play.
Right.
The percentage comes into play, but also the range. Yeah, if our range is so far above others,
Right.
then yes, you wouldn't be expected to give the same percentage.
How are you in adjusting figuring on this budget cut? With this help?
We have been through and identified cuts that would,
In other words, would the no vehicles help?
No vehicles, it's in a different fund. It's not in the general, because the governor's reduction would come in our general fund, and the vehicle purchase comes out of the vehicle reserve fund. So that doesn't. I put a memo in everybody's box this evening where Justin and I did go through and look at, depending on what the governor does, we've earmarked things that could be up for cuts, where we've asked the departments to hold on purchasing or spending these items until we know. Once we know the extent of what the governor's plan is, then we can look at that list and, with the board, try and figure out which of those, if any, go back into the budget and which stay out to make good. Now, the transfer of new funds to the vehicle reserve fund in the proposed budget, that is on that list. That's something that's going towards helping with that. And overall, it's not a good thing, because then we're not funding the vehicle reserve fund, but that is one, because that's a very large item. It's an easy one to take out if we're looking for a place to find money in the general fund budget.
To restate what to try and understand this, the capital reserve fund, you wouldn't want to use that because it's not sustainable. Meaning, we have some reserves in our vehicle reserve fund. We could use that for some of the governor's budget cuts, but then next year.
We generally don't like to use capital revenue for operating purposes.
Right.
We try and avoid that where we can.
I notice as I look at this, this handout, and I guess I'm assuming we can discuss this handout that you had given us. As I look at this, just kind of going down, I'm looking at Public Works. I know that in the original budget, they had asked for, is it one or two essentially outbuildings for trucks, for
Two.
parking?
2 buildings.
None of those are on this list, is that correct?
Because those are in the capital improvement fund. And again, the cut from the governor would come to the general fund. So I was looking for reductions in the general fund.
Okay, because I'm more apt to eliminate one of those buildings because I see that the tree replacement program is essentially eliminated
Correct.
for the whole year, and the residents aren't going to want to see that. If a resident doesn't have a tree in their front yard, they want a tree in their front yard. They could care less, quite honestly, about an outbuilding for vehicles to be parked under.
And if those were like I said, if those were in the general fund, then yes, those would have certainly been on there before that probably, so.
Well, all in all, though, we're trying to save money. Is that correct?
I think the board and the village are always trying to save money. Saving money in the capital improvement fund won't help us with the governor's cut. Because those are expenses in a different fund.
A comment about the non-union personnel salary increases. If memory serves me correctly, last year, some employees got very modest or no raises at all because we had, not as severe, but we had similar issues last year. And some of those employees have had their duties increased. And they may have taken over work that had been assigned to someone who's no longer with us, if the board really wants to cut in this area, my suggestion would be to go individual by individual and not just across the board. We have some people who are very deserving of a raise because they had none last year. And we have some people who are doing more work than was our original bargain with them when they began here. So the across-the-board thing, I would argue against and look at it on a case-by-case. Maybe we'd set a reduction goal of some amount and let the staff work it out. When we get to the point of trying to attract good people again, that's always the challenge. We have a very good staff here, and they're very productive, and they're very creative. It would be a shame to lose our momentum in that regard.
Steve and Doug, what are your thoughts on that?
I would agree with what Stan's saying. I think that while I understand what Trustee Sperling and Trustee Hines are saying, when we get into the issue of compensation, I don't think that a broad brush stroke solves the problem. I think that we almost need to go in with fine detail. There are some people that are probably deserving of no raises at all. There are some that may be deserving of maybe 1%, but like Stan said, there are certainly individuals who have taken on more duties that may be deserving of higher than just, if we cap it at 1%, they may be deserving of 2. So I'd like to be able to look at that on a case-by-case basis. But in with respect to what the two of you are saying, I absolutely get that, and I get what trustee Bond is saying. I'm just trying to mesh the two together.
I agree with capping. I like the idea that we need to stop it, because if we budget 3.5, we spend 3.5. Overall, you know, let's clarify, because we had 3.5% budgeted last year, correct?
Correct.
And we gave out some 4% raises. So that percentage is just really equates to a dollar amount. So you could give somebody a 2% raise, a 3% raise, and other folks would receive none. So it does accomplish exactly what trustee Bond and trustee Youngerman are suggesting. It's not capping it at 1%. You know, we may see somebody that deserves a 3%, but that just means that that 3% comes out of the pool, and there's less to now get divided amongst everybody. It's not a hard, nobody gets more than 1%. It just cuts the pool of money down. So I'm in complete support of that. I think that we need to do that. I know that it's not favorable to tell people that and look them in the eye, but we're looking at some major cuts, and the state's broken, and we need to fix it. We need to participate in fixing it. So I think this is absolutely the right thing to do, is to put a cap in, a hard cap, and then, again, how you see fit to divvy that pool up.
Right, that's what you've done in the past, is set here's the pool of money, and then we've done it out. And we'll work within whatever parameters the board gives us. If it's 3.25 that's in there, if it's 2, if it's 1. The lower that percentage gets, the harder it is to do what you're talking about, to give out 3% if the pool's 1 versus giving out 4% if the pool's 3.5. There's just not as much there to do that. So we'll be closer to everybody getting the same, because there's not as much flexibility the lower that pool is.
I was initially in support of a freeze
We'll work.
across the board, so I actually have been swayed to the 1%. At least it does give you some flexibility to recognize individuals that are doing exceptionally well. But now, the people that are just doing their job, that aren't above and beyond, there's no increase. It's just, you know, and it's not permanent. It's just right now, we all need to roll up our sleeves and make the best of it.
A third of us need to roll up our sleeves and make the best of it.
But
Two-thirds of us are under contract and are going to get their raises.
I like your idea, but unless I misheard, that's not what trustee Spurling and trustee Hines were alluding to. It was a 1% max.
1% cap in the budget, what we're putting in the budget.
The
So
budget
it's
was-
not per individual 1% maximum? It's,
No.
okay, all right, now that I understand, okay. Thank you.
Jeff, I'd also like to ask you, your employees, all of them, they are aware, correct, that we're going to have money, we're going to lose money out of our budget. Are they aware of this?
I can tell you that the Village Hall employees are aware of it. I would assume it's filtered to the other departments, but I've specifically
them-
spoken to the,
Those would be under union
yeah.
protection, so
I've-
I just want to
I've
make
spoken to the
sure
Village Hall employees about
that
it
they
myself.
know what we're facing and what we're looking at when we're trying to make these decisions.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I understand completely the thought behind it. It's a total savings of approximately $20,000, and that's no small chunk of change at all. But it does isolate one faction of our employees, and they're arguably our most important asset that we have here at the village. And I don't want to say arbitrarily capping their wages. I get the idea that we have $755,000 that we have to somehow cut out of the budget. And Jeff and Justin were able to find that amount of money without losing a single staff position, which other communities are not so fortunate to be able to do that. They may have to cut staff. So I think it's and then I've told some of you guys this, to go back to our last meeting, we approved purchasing trees for $12,000 that wasn't even in the budget. It's deficit spending down of our reserves unanimously. But then the next meeting, we're going to tell our employees essentially that purchasing these trees at the last meeting were more important than you guys getting raises. And I have some serious problems with that. I think we need to invest in our employees, and arbitrarily capping all of their salary increases at 1% is, I guess, it's just sending mixed signals to our employees. I'm all for being responsible with our revenue that we have. I did have one question. The capital improvement fund, or the reserve, vehicle reserve fund that we have in there, where did the money originate? At the general fund last year?
Vehicle reserve, it came from the general fund and the water fund. Both funds contribute into the vehicle reserve fund.
And so some of the vehicles that we're talking about, it wouldn't be against any rules or regulations to suggest that we make a cut there. I mean, the money, if the money originated last year in the general fund anyway, I know we don't like to go into the capital fund, but that's one area where we can make a huge change to help offset the governor's proposal, or at least hold off on the purchase of. Now, is the external buildings that you're going to buy, are those funded through water?
No, those are in the capital improvement fund. The funding for that is utility taxes is the major funding source in that fund.
And we could use utility taxes for general fund if we needed to.
You can use utility taxes for whatever you would like. We've put it there because it's been the only source we've had for capital funding in the past.
Right.
I want to clarify, because I'm a little confused. The $12,000 that we spent last meeting for the trees, was that not a preemptive spend, that we were doing that so that we could get on track to start the cycle? So it wasn't like we were just buying the tree, it was so that we could start the program and get ahead of this vicious cycle that we're always behind the eight ball on. So we didn't just spend $12,000, it was just a preemptive move to spend that money so that we can now, next year, save money by buying the trees early.
Right, I don't think it was denying that, it's just that it wasn't a budgeted item, was I think the claim that was made.
Correct.
I won't speak for you.
Yeah, no, it was an FY15 purchase that wasn't budgeted. And in our updated budget that we got from Justin, we're already going to run a deficit for this year anyway. And we might still have this year LGDF taken out of our FY15 budget.
And I mentioned this last meeting, and this is where some of what President Browley is mentioning, is it's time to sit down and be creative with the way we think about this. I know we don't want to touch capital funds, but if vehicle reserve funds came from the general fund, it's time to get creative about how we divvy those monies up, because to cut budget, to cut staff raises, to cut buying no trees, we're going to tell the residents they can't have any new trees, and we're going to spend $160,000 and put up a tent behind Public Works. That's a little tough to sell. We don't have any money to put trees up, but we have money to buy new vehicles, we have money to put new buildings up. It's going to get a little troublesome to try to explain that. So I think now's the time to sit down and get creative about how we are getting to the end game, which is dealing with the governor's budget cuts. It's something we just have to deal with, but it's time to sit down and start looking at where can we do this, how can we do it. This is a hard, fast rule. What can we move, what can't we move? And that's where we rely on you guys from finance to know how we can divvy up the pie in a creative way.
Yeah, I was in great shape with the budget the way it was going. And then I get this, like you said, 5 minutes ago, and I started reading some of this, and now I'm going to go through the whole budget again, and because I thought you guys did a good job. But now you're picking out some things here, like Doug said, that it's hard to explain to people. It's hard to explain, oh, you're not going to have any trees. We told you you're going to have trees, but now you're going to have it. And some of it's really stupid little stuff, but remove the summer concerts.
And
Now-
none of these are things that we've cut out of the budget.
Okay,
These are everything on that list is still in the budget.
okay.
All we've done is earmark them as possible things that could be cut if the governor takes the money.
Right.
That he's talking about taking.
But things like summer concert, I think it's only, I don't know what, the ice cream and the kayak trip and the photo contest and purchasing logo items. I have no idea what that stuff is. But I know the two concerts here, you got 200-300 people every time coming here, and you're telling those people, forget it. That's not going to go over real well. I mean, it just, it seems like somehow they're going to say, can you come up with $600? Well, not really.
We've actually already contributed for.
Okay.
The summer concert series, so that one will come off the list.
And there's got to be at least 4 things in here that are vehicle reserve transfers. I mean, they're wiped out already. We don't have to worry about it. It's all wiped
Oh,
out.
that's this year's contribution into that fund.
What President Brawley is saying is there's already money in the fund from previous years that
Okay.
he was asking about bringing back to the general fund. But yeah, the money, the new money going to the vehicle reserve fund is proposed to be cut out, because that's one of the largest expenses we have in the general fund, other than personnel.
And you're saying possibly we'd be 155,000 short, even doing this,
If the governor takes
But-
the full 50%, that'd be 900,000.
right?
But that won't be until their next fiscal year of July 1
Well, I mean, it's hard to tell, because like you say, he's talking about sweeping money
from FY.
from this year still. So then it could hit us.
Right.
We could feel the full effect of it. That's where we just don't know. And so that's why, I went through just preemptively to try and look at how can we get to 900,000 if that's what we need to get to. And, just came up with a list of items to share with you so that you guys can be thinking about them. Because right now, it's all staying in the budget. We're going to ask you to approve the budget with all of that in there. And then once we know, what the governor ends up finally doing, then we'll have to go back and figure out what needs to come.
Need to be done,
Right,
because
what
our
needs to come up.
reserve, I've said before, we have the highest reserve around here. $600 for 2 concerts or some trees, so we lower our reserve, so what? I mean, as long as we're gonna put this budget, as you brought it up.
Yes.
And okay that, then we'll worry about
Yeah.
cutting it as the shortage comes in.
Yeah,
All right,
that's the plan. I just wanted to give this to you so you could be thinking about it, because there are things that you're going to see, and you're going to be like, well, no, I want that in there no matter what.
Yeah.
So that's why I want you looking at it and thinking about it. But right now, everything is in the budget.
okay.
As I look at this, and I asked Doug, the cost of those 2 buildings is $160,000. Right now, I see tree replacement potentially getting the axe at $51,000. So when I do my basic math, I do $160,000 for the buildings. If we were to fully fund our tree program, it's $90,000. 160 minus 90 still gives me $70,000 in savings. So I'm still saving more by doing that than eliminating the tree replacement and almost the tree replacement and the stump grinding. That's $76,000. I'm going to find a way to put trees in the budget. And that's something that we've been telling the residents for a long time, we only have so many dollars. Why don't you make a donation to the tree replacement program? We'll split the cost with you. And now we're saying we potentially don't even have the money to do that. And I'm not willing to accept that.
And again, right now, the trees are in the budget, and when it comes time to make the cuts that look like it'll be necessary based on the governor's thing, then the board can say, I want the trees in, and instead, we do this. Like I said, I just went through the general fund and was trying to figure out what in there we could possibly cut if we need to. I mean, I think there's several things in there that some of you won't agree with, but trying to get to 900,000 in the general fund was
Now, if
not easy, so.
if we do this and we're going to pass the budget the way it sits, we're going to leave the 3.25%, is what I'm hearing. We would leave that in there for the salary increases. If this comes down, the budget gets cut, we start going through this and looking at it. At that point, do you think that getting creative and looking at other ways to manipulate some of the funds to get to, so we can save some of the things like Trustee Youngerman mentioned, the trees and things where we can, vehicles, fund transfers, things like that? Because if I'm clear, all of these things where we remove the transfer to vehicle reserve, vehicle reserve is a bank account sitting out there with money in it currently. So when we talked about buying these new vehicles, it's coming out of there.
Right.
This money that's in the budget is really just replenishing,
It's new money to go in there every year.
go in that
the
bank
general
account.
fund and water fund.
so we can
Send a
continue to
proportion.
build that, so that when we need new vehicles, we have the money.
Correct.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that this money in the budget isn't to buy new vehicles. We're using the money that's in the bank
Right,
to buy the new vehicles. So if we didn't put new money in, the balance would just drop.
correct. That's what happened the first time we had the vehicle reserve fund is back in '08 and everything, we had to stop funding it, and we just eventually spent it down till there was nothing left there.
Okay.
So,
By what date do you think we might really know what the situation in Springfield would be?
I mean, at the legislative breakfast, most of the, long-term senators and representatives said they felt they'll be in session at least part of the summer, if not all summer, to hammer out a budget. I don't know if we'll have a good idea. I mean, we should know before it gets finalized. I think we'd have a good idea, but it'll still be June, July, probably.
It'll be after
And that,
our budget.
right, and that's why
So
we're looking at asking you to approve the budget as we've developed it. And then the list of items you've had, I've asked the staff to hold off on those items until we figure out, and then, see which ones you want to get back in the budget, which ones we can fit in the budget, and once we have better information.
Is the state going after every municipality's LGDF funds?
Yes.
Or just the ones that are
No,
all of
fiscally responsible?
we're going after everybody,
They're going after the irresponsible ones, too.
yes. There will be some communities that'll be close, if not all the way to bankruptcy, if this happens, because they can't afford that kind of loss.
Well, it sounds like we may have support for reducing the raises, but it also sounds like if we didn't want to solve that today, because we don't have a clear idea of exactly what the governor's going to cut, we could approve the budget. It begins May 1, raises don't happen until November.
November 1.
So we have months to think about that and talk about that. There will be things in the budget, though, that, in your draft freeze items, that will pass before likely the state passes a budget. And so that'll be stuff that, if it's earmarked and it's frozen, like the concerts, which I know they're in, but they're an example of something that would happen before this budget gets approved, then we just wouldn't do. And same thing with some of the trees. If we've earmarked to freeze those, and we get past the date where we can plant trees, or we won't do our spring planting and that, it'll just be things that we'll have to put off.
The other thing that I think we need to keep in mind, we don't know if this is going to be just this year. Governor can keep doing this his whole term.
And I wouldn't plan on it being 1 year.
Yeah, I
mean,
mean,
once,
we need to keep that in mind, that this may be how it is, at least for the next 4 years.
I mean, that's, the way Justin and I are looking at it is, once they have the money, they'll be hard pressed to give it back.
Right,
'Cause
exactly. Once he
they'll continue to
gets-
have a need for it.
Once he gets his way with this,
But
that's
they
it.
told
That's
us
how
the
it's gonna
income
be.
tax increase was just going to be temporary. Can't we believe what they tell us?
You
Well,
go
that
ahead and
expired.
believe him.
So was the tollway.
Exactly. So it's a tough situation. It's tough decisions.
Okay. Just to move things along on the raises, trustee Hines would like it to only budget 1%. Trustee Spurling would like to do the same. And Doug, how does Stan,
Not per
Steve, and Denny?
1% of the budget, not 1% per
Yes.
person.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm okay with
On
that.
board with that? Okay.
Yep. Well, although we did get some guidance that may not be a large enough pool to have much impact.
Well, I'm just saying there won't be as much ability to vary between your good employees and your bad employees. I mean, like I said, we'll work in whatever parameters you give us, but the less you have, the harder it is to provide that variance between.
Can I
Well,
just?
if we have
add-
bad employees, I would hope that they're no longer employees.
I would just like to add the comment, I'd rather cap it than have to do any type of layoffs. I'd rather have it be at the 1% where we can keep our employees. For me, that's what it comes
I
down
think
to.
they would all agree, but the current draft that Jeff prepared doesn't include any layoffs. And there
Right,
are
I
towns
see
that are going to have to lay off.
I don't think we have any bad employees. I think we have all good employees, but I think some of them are making way too much money compared to the position if they went elsewhere. And I think that's time that Public Works figures that out too, and we keep our budget down on wages, because that's usually your highest,
That is our
because
highest.
that contributes to the insurance and contributes to everything else. And even insurance-wise, you can, no matter what you're making, there's nobody around this area that pays as much insurance as we do for each employee, so that they've got to take that in consideration with their salary.
And keep in mind that with the salary freeze, and we worry about losing employees and things, well, every municipality, and as you just stated, some of them maybe go bankrupt.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of movement to go to another municipality because nobody's going to be hiring. I would venture to guess you're going to see a hiring freeze at most places, along with salary freezes and possible reductions at some levels.
And in the past, we've got people come from other, I mean, the last 5 years, we've had people from other municipalities come to work here because we do pay more. And we have some, like the last policeman we got, where they just, what do you have, 11 years of experience or something, and they got rid of them? I mean, that's just unbelievable to me that you have a guy that's in police work for 11 years, and you say, we're going to cut everybody below 12 years. That's just unbelievable. I mean, that's just poor municipality, I think.
We as a board keep talking about holding the line on salaries, whether it be union or non-union employees. And maybe it's time to draw the line, and we're holding the line, and unions, it's coming up. You know, we're starting here, and you know, it's not going to be as sweet as it has been in the past.
All the employees for the village of Montgomery have always been satisfied with what we got. We have to tell them now, we always give them something, we have to lay the law down. That's all there is to it. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's the way I feel.
I agree.
Okay. That's the only budget change that I specifically wrote down. Trustee Hines mentioned that he didn't want to purchase any vehicles. Any other thoughts on that?
I think the code enforcement, buying a new vehicle for code enforcement I don't think we need to buy a new vehicle. I think we could buy a used vehicle. We could buy, it's the code enforcement vehicle. I get with dual axles and plows and things like that where there's some specifications, but I can't imagine what the specifications are for a code enforcement officer's vehicle. This lightweight SUV, I can't imagine that there's any specialties to that vehicle, that we couldn't find a vehicle somewhere that would be used in decent shape for a lot less than purchasing a brand-new vehicle.
Why can't we use the vehicle that they have?
And again, I suggested that at the last meeting. It's got 126,000 miles on it. I don't know what the value of it as a trade-in is, but drive it until the wheels fall off and then go purchase a used vehicle.
Director Pubens, do you have any information on the vehicle?
Not on that one in particular, but just the subject of used versus new. Trustee, we generally get very favorable pricing on new vehicles. For instance, we bought a pickup truck this past year that retailed at $34,000 through the bidding processes we use. We got it for about $27,000. So that combined with the idea that unfortunately, when you buy used vehicles, you're oftentimes buying other people's problems. Again, there's no guarantee that you can't find good used vehicles, but there's a higher likelihood that you may have some unforeseen problems. And then generally, you don't have warranty coverage with those vehicles. So again, that's not to say one way is always right or one is always wrong. It's just.
Well, and I'm not suggesting we go buy
Though, that's why we have generally not purchased used.
I'm not suggesting we go buy a 2005, but if we bought a 1 or 2 model year old vehicle and let somebody else have taken the hit for the depreciation, it certainly would behoove us to do that, and there would still be a warranty left on that vehicle. So, and we have a mechanic that's pretty darn good from what I hear, that I would think that we could bring the vehicle to him to go through it before we would purchase it and see that it's mechanically sound and a good purchase and utilize our asset in having such a good mechanic. So I just, again, I think it's time that we have to get creative. And I understand the specifications when we're talking about plows and dual axle vehicles and things. But when we're talking about this one particular vehicle, it's not a police vehicle, it's not an emergency response vehicle. It's a car to drive around town and do code enforcement. I'm not sure we need to purchase a new vehicle for that, to do that. I think we could definitely purchase a reasonably priced used vehicle. That's just where I'm at.
I think our vehicles are in darn good shape, not excellent, but darn good shape. That mechanic does one heck of a job. And when he brings it in they bring it in for a grease job or oil change, he goes through the whole thing, and he keeps those things running. So I don't think we need new vehicles for another year. That's my
Trying
opinion.
to look at this more globally than just the one vehicle, but let's say we did that with all of our vehicles, purchased used and not the double axle and that. If we started purchasing slightly used vehicles, then are we going to see a request for a second mechanic in future years? And that's a long-term thought, that if we start purchasing vehicles like this, we're going to need more mechanic time than is available, as was apparent during the snowstorm when he had to come off a route plowing to go fix vehicles. And if we saved a couple bucks here to do that, and he's not out plowing when he's needed, just something to think about in the future. While I don't think that's going to have a huge impact on one vehicle, what we can do, if you guys are okay with it, Director Pubens, if you could bring, I know the purchase of that would be later on this year, but if you could bring information about the current vehicle and kind of what you're thinking about replacing. We've pulled this out of the last two budgets, I think, before we approved it. If you could bring that to the next meeting, we could certainly make changes during the public hearings, right? So then we can decide yea or nay on that specific vehicle. I think it's prudent of us to look at it that way, as opposed to we don't need a vehicle. Well, let's see the vehicle we have, and let's get Alan's thought process on it.
I think a lot of it too is if it's a specialty vehicle. Now, Alan bought a used bucket truck, and that doesn't seem to have any problems right now, and he saved us a lot of money doing it, and that was used. And a bucket truck isn't used that much. And this car, you know, this guy isn't going to go 100 miles an hour down the street or anything chasing anybody. He just goes from A to B, where that car's not going to be used.
Yeah. Obviously, cars don't always brake only when you go 100 miles an hour.
No, it's
It's
just,
going to get a lot of road time.
yeah, it just depends on how specialty that car really is needed. And the bucket truck, we didn't need a brand-new bucket truck. And I thought Alan did a great job on that one. Saved us money.
That was a great purchase, it really was. I think we have to be cautious, though, about saying this use of a vehicle makes it okay to buy used, or this use of vehicle restricts us to only buying new. I mean, there's some vehicles that it's very important that they run all the time, police cars, right? But I wouldn't, let's not just fall into talk about painting with a broad brush. That one of our strategies is to look at used. We should probably include that across the board. You'll all have the decision to decide whether you agree with that or not. But it probably works more the other way when we say, well, this is a community development vehicle and it may only be on the road 3 days a week. Well, piece of junk's a piece of junk, whether you're driving it 3 hours a week, 3 days a week, 24/7. So again, I'm not trying to say we shouldn't investigate the purchase of used, but I think we need to be cautious that we just don't generalize that these vehicles should all be used and these should all be new.
Mike, maybe for our next discussion during the public hearing, could we get details on the list of vehicles? When we did our 2x2, you know, it might have been thrown out there that this one has this mileage or whatever the case is. It's hard to keep track of that. So if we could just get a little bit of detail on each of these vehicles listed and maybe what is triggering Alan to say, yeah, it's time for this one? And I do have a note that 2 of them were deferred from last year, single axle plow and the tandem axle plow. So if, you know, he was saying that last year, I would like to know the condition of them and what's kind of bringing them to the forefront to say, yeah, we need to look at replacing these specific vehicles now. And then maybe we can discuss each of them at that time.
Okay. Is there anything else in the draft budget that you guys want to discuss? One thing that I was going to comment on, or at least ask Justin about, the utility taxes that we get. I know it's not specifically broken out in this document. Has the level of those taxes been going down?
Over a period of years, yes, it has been going down. Specific of the taxes, specifically the telecommunications tax, has been going down.
I just thought of that as I switched from Comcast to DirecTV. We don't get utility tax from the satellites. So it's just something to think about long-term. Are we going to see a decrease? I never thought about it before, but Comcast, they run the lines in the rear yards. Are they going to go wireless at some point where we're not going to get that tax at all?
We get two different taxes from them. One, the cable franchise, which is in the general fund, and then the telecommunications, there is a piece of, whether it's Comcast or AT&T, UVerse, that would also be going towards the, a portion would go toward telecommunications tax, and then a portion would go to cable franchise for that. So really what you're looking at is those people that are getting rid of their home phone line and going to cell phone, or just getting rid of,
Sure.
you know, the triple play or double play with Comcast and going to what you were talking about.
And when you would go to your cell phone and you live in the village of Montgomery, you pay the only sort of tax that you would pay would be a 911 that we don't, that we now transfer to KenCom as part of our, right, contribution?
Part of
Just something to think long-term. I think we get $2 million or so a year from our utility taxes, and some of those have been going down, and they probably will continue. You've seen people switch to, I mean, they're jumping around to the cheapest thing and going wireless with their cell phones, so.
When you look at natural gas and electric utility taxes, it honestly depends upon the season. It depends upon where prices are, how much people are using. So we've seen a reverse where in prior years, we've seen natural gas taxes going down and electric taxes going up. This year, it did the exact opposite. So natural gas tax went up and electric went down. So if you look at those two together over the last few years, it's been pretty even if you look at them together.
So primarily, we have three funding sources in our general fund. We have our property taxes, we have our LGDF, and then our utility tax. Is that accurate?
Not in the general.
In the general fund, sales tax would be your third one.
Sales tax, that's what I meant. Sales tax, property tax,
LGDF.
LGDF. And so we cap our property taxes we have for the last few years. Our sales tax numbers go up a little bit. They've been going up. And then the LGDF is going to get cut. Just something to think about is all of these interplay. You know, we cap our property tax because that's what the residents want, but it's something to think about future. So,
One more comment maybe is to encourage everyone to look at the revenue side too. We just had a pretty nice agreement for a cellular tower that is long-term. And I think there's another similar deal that's kind of gotten bogged down a little bit. Now might be the time to refocus on some of that kind of project to raise the revenue side of the scale too.
yep. All right. Are there any other budget-specific comments? If you think of any, bring it up. Otherwise, we'll discuss specifically the vehicles at the next meeting, and then keep our eyes on Springfield, too. Thank you. All right, moving on, we have the Aurora Township Joint Paving Project. And with that, I will turn it over to Director Pubens for his presentation.
Thank you, President Brawley. Not too long ago, I was contacted by the Aurora Township Highway Commissioner, John Shoemaker, who had proposed something that's a little unique for us, but I think well worth considering. Each year, the township, just as the village does, puts together a road program. And as you know, along the Montgomery Road corridor in particular, we have excuse me, the village limit line kind of ducks in and out. So we have some of our streets that will be village streets for a period, and then township, and then possibly going back to village. So what Mr. Shoemaker had proposed to us is that we partner together under the township road contract this year to try to avoid having gaps in their resurfacing program. So they had identified some streets that they were going to resurface this year. If we don't participate, they'll basically stop at the village limit line, go to back to the township line and start again. So you should have received a handout tonight, and I think we have the same handouts are being projected up on the board. The streets in question are Gate Street and Union Street, which are on the right side of the page there, and our sections are the yellow portion, and the township sections are the blue portion. And then down in the lower left, we have 4th Street, which comes south of Montgomery Road, and then Wabansia Avenue, a short piece in front of the Well 8 complex. So the township has put together a cost estimate. This work is competitively bid. The townships get assistance from the county division of highways to both put together the contracts and to take care of the letting and contract award process. So again, as we would, these are competitively bid, so we can feel some assurance that the pricing is within reason. So what I'm asking tonight is for you to consider and hopefully give consensus for us to participate with the township road program in an amount of approximately $17,400. And again, it's not a large length of street. Again, I don't know, you should have 2 handouts tonight. Jeff, do we have the table that shows the streets?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the streets there and the limits. So, you know, we're talking about 1,000 feet of pavement or so. But again, I think just a good partnership to try to do this and capitalize on one single contract instead of trying to do 2 separate contracts, or what would likely happen is that those streets may not get included in our program this year. So, if I could just add, I'm sorry, trustee, the funding, we would propose to use the infrastructure repair funds, which are the funds that are coming from the sales tax increase. We hadn't talked about these streets in particular when we've been talking about that fund in the past, but I felt that the use for resurfacing these streets was in line with the intent for the use of those funds in general. Thank you.
That was my question. Thank you. Along with like what we were talking about maybe a month ago, as far as the bridge, this is really a shovel-ready project that we could do this year and use some of the funds that we're receiving, because I believe the sales tax goes into effect July 1st. Do you know when the work would be taking place?
I'm sure the work will be done in the early part of the summer. So I'm going to speak generically, and then maybe Director Van Voren may want to get into more detail. I think we might end up using other funds, other village funds, to reimburse the township for their costs, and then we would recoup those funds once we started collecting the infrastructure repair funds. It would all be done in this fiscal year. But again, I know the township is anxious to get this out. They've already got it out to bid.
But we're projecting having enough funds to repair the bridge and also do this work as well. And I don't know the exact dollar amount of what we're projecting for this year. I can't remember, but we're covered there?
I believe we are. And
Okay,
the
Justin's
bridge-
saying yes.
The bridge estimates are estimates, and we generally, we don't push them up artificially high, but we're fairly conservative, so we'd rather overestimate than underestimate. So
Okay.
I don't think we have any problem covering this a relatively small amount of money for road work.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other thoughts?
I think it's a great use of the township and the village working together because how often do we complain about, well, why would you stop here? and then we come in 2 years later and tear it all up again, this is perfect. This is what it's supposed to be. Somebody having some forethought to look ahead and say, hey, do you guys want to participate? We'll just roll right through, because they're going to, this will all be part of their contract.
Right. Yeah, we're just basically.
They'll oversee the
reimbursing
project and-
managing. And I have to give a tip of that to Mr. Shoemaker, the Aurora Township Highway Commissioner, approached us on this. And as I told him, I said, this is one of those things we talk about an awful lot, but it seems difficult to pull off sometimes. So hopefully this is the first of something you might see each year as he continues to do work along that corridor where we have
And that's
similar boundaries.
what I was going to say, is this is exactly what we talk about. This is awesome, and hopefully we do this every year. If we're in the area and he's doing, if he needs us to do a small chunk of our road, or if we're doing a big chunk and we need him to do a small chunk, if he can approach us in the fall when we're doing our design, that'd be even better. But let's see if we can do things like this more often.
Absolutely.
I think since John took it over about 6 years ago, there's been a big change in attitude between us and township. He's done an excellent job. But when was Rabancia completely done all the way further, Pete? I remember in 2001, when I got to be a trustee, I drove back there for some reason, I don't even know why, and I thought it was an alley, and I thought it was a stagecoach route. I mean, my car was just, I couldn't believe it didn't even look like a street to me. And right after that, I think we paved it. Did we not?
Honestly, I'd have to go back and look. We have record of all the roads we've paved since,
Because there isn't a lot of traffic back there, and I wouldn't think,
it has, it's poorly drained back there.
very poorly.
Drainage is oftentimes the enemy of road conditions, so I have to go back and find out when we last paved it. But I'm not absolutely surprised it needs to be repaved, to be honest with you, because of the condition.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think the work we did might have been just a partial paving because of the condition. I don't believe we did the entire length of it, and it's still pretty narrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't done a reconstruction or anything like that. And this work will generally be just overlay, like 1.5 inch overlay. It's a pretty basic job, but again, with the traffic counts being lower on all these streets, we think it's a reasonably adequate approach.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Move on to Plan Commission ordinances or updates, and go ahead.
Thank you. As we talked about at your last regular board meeting, and you accepted the recommendation from the Plan Commission for the text amendment for our manufacturing district height limit, we would intend to bring this forward to the board next week for final approval of the text amendment. As you might recall, we had laid out to the Plan Commission that the base elevation of 90 feet should move to 100 foot for a 500-foot setback from residential properties, and we added commercial properties into the text as well. And then anything that would be higher than 100 feet for each foot in elevation, we would add 2 feet in horizontal setback from residential and commercial properties. So with that in mind, we would look for final action from the board next week.
Okay. Are there any comments on this? I know we discussed it at the last meeting briefly.
I think Rich is doing a wonderful job on this.
I'll tell him. Okay. Move on, department updates. Jeff?
I'm sorry, there's one other.
Oh.
If you don't mind.
Oh, you just covered just the one, sorry.
Sorry, yes, sir. The Montgomery Business Park is the associated item with the proposed development that would require the need for the text amendment that we just talked about. So Montgomery Business Center Unit 1 would be 29 acres directly east of VVF and north of Alcott Road. There would be right-of-way dedication for the extension of Commerce Drive to the north to what would be the future extension of Nell Road east-west road that would be at the northern boundary of the 29 acres. So this is the first of hopefully many plats within the Montgomery Business Center. There's a lot of history on this property, some of which we've talked about recently. But this would jumpstart not only the business center, but the TIF, because of the potential significant AAV that would go into this project. So both MEDC and the village have been working hard to make sure that this project moves along, and we're very excited about that happening. So the final plat would be up for this unit on your agenda next week.
All right,
No.
all right. And I'll ask Chief Myers to report.
Yes, thank you. This Friday in the update, I will send you a intergovernmental agreement between the Village of Hinckley, the Village of Sugar Grove, and ourselves in regards to the impoundment of motor vehicles that are, when someone gets arrested in town. Actually, Katie has started that towing ordinance months ago. We passed that. This is an IGA to work with the other two towns to save us some money. I'll pass that to you on Friday. It'll be on the agenda for Monday night for approval. April 15th is a date when Sugar Grove will have their hearing. Our board meeting is April 13th, so I'd like to get that approved long before that. We will have a training session prior to April 15th to have my sergeant and Deputy Chief Sanders be able to train our officers on that process. So you'll see that agreement this Friday. Thank you very much.
Director Poopins?
Thank you. This item is relatively new. We just received our State of Illinois Central Management Services, CMS, request for salt bids. And as you can remember, last year we had some challenges with that process, namely that we had submitted a request for salt. The contract did not require the vendors or the bidders to guarantee salt for all the agencies that wanted to participate. We were one of those that did not get salt. The contract has not been modified this year, so there's still a possibility. I've been in contact with directors in our neighboring communities. The strategy that we feel is probably worth pursuing is to submit our request through CMS again. One of the challenges with that, another challenge is we don't have a lot of time to make that decision. It's due back March 27th. So that we would submit through the CMS program, but start preparations for our own bidding of salt should that agreement not come to fruition. If we participate in the CMS program, we're committing to purchasing whatever quantity that we request. So we can't say, well, we'd like a bid for this, but we can't then decline to take it. So if we go in with CMS and we get a price back, we're committed to taking that price. I'm not too concerned about pricing being an issue. I don't think we would see, I don't think we're going to, if we get a bid back, I don't think it's going to be incredibly high or incredibly low. I think it's going to be pretty much in line with what everybody's paying. So it's really just a matter of, that date when we're certain that we have salt. So we have about 1,200 to 1,500 tons on the ground right now in our storage shed. That's not enough to get us through the entire year, but there is some buffer there if it took us some time, longer time than usual, to secure salt supplies. So we would generally, I've talked with our street supervisor, Gary Byer. Our request this year would be for 2,500 tons. As you remember, we're generally required to buy 80% of that, so 2,000 tons. We have the option of buying 120% of that, so 3,000 tons, which we think is going to be adequate for our needs. So it's my intent, unless I hear otherwise, to submit our CMS request and, again, begin preparations, at least initially, to be ready to go out for our own bid, should that come back empty.
Quick
Can you-
question, go ahead.
Can you tell us what percent of the contract we've fulfilled for this year?
We weren't with CMS this year. We had a contract with North American Salt. We just purchased our 80%.
Okay. So we're at the
2,400.
minimum requirement as per our contract.
Right.
Okay.
We have a full shed. We're just going to stop. Part of that is Monday we'll have some IDOT resolutions for you to consider. IDOT, after considering the situation, is going to allow us to use MFT funds to pay for last year's salt, stuff we've been buying, which for a period of time we weren't sure that they were going to allow us. So I have a 10-day deadline basically after the end of our current contract. So we have a full shed. We bought our 80%. We're just going to stop. We could buy another 100 tons or so, but with our existing funds. But I think we're good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I got a question, Mike. The CMS contract that you got, I know you said there was no changes this year from last year. Was there changes made to that contract the year before, or are they just administering the whole program differently last year than they ever did before?
I think the program has been the same, and I think the contract language has been the same. I'm not an expert on the specifications in that contract, but they were very clear in the letter that we received this year that they call this an opt-in contract for the vendors, meaning they get to choose. And in big, bold, black letters, it says, "Be prepared, or you may wish to pursue salt contracts on your own." I'm paraphrasing, but, so I don't have any insight as to the process that went on with CMS or how they managed the feedback that they received. My understanding was there were several hundred agencies that didn't get salt out of about 700 or 750 that requested it, so it seems like a pretty significant number. But
Okay.
As long as you talk to the other surrounding areas, because we were the highest. I don't know where they bought theirs at, but they were considerably lower, like 2 years ago. 2 years ago, you had a great price. And last year, it was, because of the circumstances, it was sky high, but,
well, for those agencies that had new contracts this year, trustee, the range that IDOT, I keep saying IDOT, it's actually Central CMS, different state agency. CMS reported their range of bids were $70 per ton to $140 per ton. We were at $103.23. So, you know, if you look around regionally, we were average. It's a kind of a strange process. You'll see neighboring communities paying, some years, different prices for salt. Several years ago, we were down around $60, and Oswego was paying $90, and then, you know, things turned around, and so it's difficult to predict exactly where we'll land and how we'll compare to our neighbors. But
All right. Director Van Born?
Nothing at this time.
All right. And Director Young?
Well, I wish I could say nothing at this time.
You got
I
stuff
can't-
going
can't
on.
help myself. Just quick updates. Michael's, you might recall, was in a month or so ago for 1266 Orchard Road. They've purchased both of those properties now, so they're moving forward with their development, so that's good news. With the warmer weather, we're seeing uptick in permits, and at the same time, we've sent out letters from code enforcement regarding cleanup items that were not completed last fall. So this becomes the start of our busy time for building permits. Speedway's moving forward with their groundbreaking on their property, probably within the next 3 weeks, for their new gas station that was approved last year. Riverview Restaurant is just about completed and hope for a mid-May or early May opening. At the same time, the Chamber intends to have their annual dinner at Riverview and have it in town for the first time for many years. So I think that's an excellent move. We might delay, the Chamber might delay the actual date of the annual dinner to coincide with Riverview being open. O'Reilly Auto Parts, you'll be seeing more about that in terms of a soft opening, and then a grand opening, which you'll all be invited to, as well as Heinz Building Supply on Alcott Road. They'll be doing a soft opening in May and also a grand opening in the near future. So you'll be getting notice on that. And finally, we're working with the MEDC on a cleanup date, much like we did for Alcott Road last year. We would focus on Douglas Road this year. In June, I believe it's June 18th, would be a tour of the commercial property throughout the village for real estate brokers, but prior to that, on, I believe it's June 12th, we would have a cleanup day. So that worked out well with the MEDC and businesses last year on Alcott, and we intend to do that again on Douglas Road in June. So, thank you.
I noticed in the Tribune, is it Raleigh Homes that has the apartments? Had this great picture and all kinds of things, saying nice things about Montgomery, including our Montgomery Fest. Almost sounded like they were on the river, but it was very nice. I mean, a nice section in there just for those few homes. It really was outstanding.
They have a 4-unit building under construction
Yeah.
now. It's framed. They're moving forward with that construction. They still have 4 additional pads that were abandoned back during this slowdown. They're just about done. They've poured the last of the single-family permit portion, and so they'll hopefully be moving into those 4 other slabs that have been sitting for a while.
Good, thank you.
All right, that is our update.
One quick question, 3031 interchange? Is that, I saw some signs on that.
Well, IDOT is planning on opening up the Watkins Street crossing on Thursday. I haven't spoken to their representatives this week. I'll try to do that and get something in the notes to you, but they needed to, the contractor needed to do temporary striping in preparation for that. So as of right now, they're still on for Thursday to open Watkins Street. ICC will be there with IDOT and the contractor to review the signal operation to make sure everything is up to snuff, and if it is, then they will open that, and as part of their final phase of the project, then they'll start to remove the K Street crossing, basically from Route 31. Well, they won't remove it from all the way from Route 31. There'll still be access to Cartworks down below, but they'll start to close the K Street crossing.
Okay.
My neighbors have asked, where are the no truck, big oversized truck signs that were going to be placed there? And I said, well, it wasn't open yet. That Mike would have them up as soon as they open, though.
I don't know if I'll have them up by Thursday.
Well, no, but I mean,
We're working, I mean, we've talked to IDOT about it and what we can do to sign that to try to, you know, prevent trucks from going through that neighborhood. But yeah, we certainly have that in our plans.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there any new or unfinished business?
I had one item. The door-to-door sales season has begun. I've begun to get some complaints about people soliciting without a permit. And I wanted to mention for the public and to recognize the village created this week a webpage that lists the companies that have successfully applied for a solicitor's permit. And I think the intent is to try to keep that current. So it'll be easy for residents to determine whether they're talking with a permitted salesperson or not. And there are several good reasons why they should have a solicitor's permit. So the webpage also describes the importance of that and what to do if they encounter someone that does not have a permit. So I'm grateful to the village for doing that.
This is on the village webpage? Okay.
It's brand new.
I had seen discussion about it, but that's very good, thank you.
And the PD is aware of when permits are issued? The PD is aware of that, so the officers on the street know who has permits, who doesn't?
Correct.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss litigation which is filed and pending pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2 C11.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second by trustee Bond. Call the roll, please.
Trustee Spurling, or, sorry. Who?
Bond.
Trustee Youngerman. Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling. Trustee Lee. Trustee Hines.
Awesome.
I mean,
I wasn't going to start without anybody, but since you put your jacket on. Call the meeting back to order and entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved in second. Call the roll, please.
Trustee Hines. Trustee Youngerman. Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling. Trustee Lee.
yes.
And we're adjourned. Thank you.